criminal offence. I have received assurances from the member and from the Government Chief Whip that the member has voluntarily agreed not to attend the House of Commons for the period of the bill. I, the House of Commons Commission and the House Service take the safety of our staff and the parliamentary community as a whole very seriously, and ensuring that any necessary measures are taken in respect of MPs and employees and staff. All members have access to the Independent Sexual Misconduct Advisory Service by contacting the new single independent ICGS helpline and should not hesitate to use it. While the investigation is ongoing, I believe that it will be wholly inappropriate for any further reference to be made to this matter in the House, including any attempt to name the member concerned. I would appreciate your cooperation on this matter. Right, we now go to questions. Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. Sam Terry.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. NHS Test and Trace is consistently reaching tens of thousands of people who need to isolate each week. In the latest week's data, 84.3% of contacts were reached and asked to self-isolate where contact details were provided. Since its launch, we've reached over 300,000 people who may have been unwittingly carrying the virus and transmitting it, to ensure that they keep themselves safe and keep their community safe.
And I think the group tell the Secretary of State.
Yes. And I apologise, Mr. Speaker, if I could ask you, if I may, group this question along with the other questions 2, 3, 4 and 5.
Excellent. Sam Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder, scientists and SAGE have continuously warned that for the test and trace system to be successful, 80% of people in contact with those with COVID must be reached, and we're well off that target, I'm afraid to say. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, whether the Minister will consider seeking advice from our European partners who have actually had a functioning system since May, or is he going to continue to allow private sector, which has no proven track record in this particular instance, and protect some of the interests of some particular companies that certain civil servants allegedly may have links with? Or are we actually going to see a serious approach on this?
Yes, unlike the question, we will have a serious approach to this. I will absolutely defend, Mr. Speaker, defend to all ends the teams who work on our NHS test and trace system, the private sector companies without whom this would be impossible, the civil servants who are working day and night to make this happen. And I will not have disparaging remarks about civil servants made in this House by the honourable gentleman who do so much during this pandemic. And anyway, Mr. Speaker, I don't think he was listening to the answer, because the latest week's data show 84.3% of contacts were reached and asked to self-isolate where contact details were provided.
Mary Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children residents welcome the release from the restrictions from the intervention measures, which will take place tomorrow, and they welcome the more local approach to this as well. Effective test and trace has been a really vital part of getting us to this position and keeping those rates low. In order to continue with this, would the Minister consider devolving testing of positive cases to local authorities like Stockport, which have a 99% positive rate of success?
Yes, my honourable friend has played a very important role, and I pay tribute to her and her community in playing the role to the success of the local action that we had to take in Stockport and other parts of Greater Manchester, meaning we were able to release the measures last week. And I'm grateful to her work and the work of her council and other local leaders, and most importantly, the people of Stockport who have worked hard and followed the rules, and the case rate is coming down. She's absolutely right that the integration of a national system that can move fast at scale and the local system where often they can reach more contacts because there are boots on the ground and people who know the communities inside out. It is the integration of the two that is critical.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How does my honourable friend's assessment compare to other countries' track and trace programmes? And what lessons are we learning from countries such as Germany and South Korea, who seem to be having some success with their own systems?
Yes, absolutely. Well, of course we learn the lessons, and I talk to my international counterparts, including in Germany and South Korea. Actually, compared to international systems, with our rates now, with the figures I've just read out, we are absolutely in the top tranche and we're constantly looking all around the world to how we can improve the operation of Test and Trace.
Lynn Saxby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Devon's Director of Public Health has confirmed we in North Devon have had no statistically significant increase in cases as a result of the return of tourism. Can my right honourable friend confirm that Test and Trace will ensure that this remains the case?
Well, I pay tribute to my honourable friend for everything she's done to stick up for North Devon in this difficult time, and I'm really pleased that there is no evident increase in COVID in Devon as a result of the tourism, because so many people go to Devon during the summer, especially because it's such a wonderful place to be. And we must ensure that through Test and Trace and through the social distancing, which is the first line of defence against this virus, that remains the case.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, COVID hit Croydon and the rest of London early and hard, but Croydon has done us proud, and the number of infections have been very low for a number of weeks now, thanks to the hard work of the people in the borough. We welcome the move towards more local track and trace, where expertise and local knowledge make all the difference. But as my Director of Public Health said to me, we've just finished the beginning of this thing, and we're now starting the next chapter. And one of the things that keeps her awake at night is the need for certainty about budgets for outbreak control plans beyond the end of the year. Can the Secretary of State provide some reassurance?
Well, absolutely. I'm glad of what she says about the constantly improving integration between the national and the local system, and we've worked hard to make that happen. I'm glad to hear that it's happening in Croydon as it is in other parts of the country. Of course, the budgets around this are important. We've been clear that the financial provision will be made. I can't make any more definitive statement than that at this stage, but of course it's a very important consideration.
We're heading up to Scotland to the SNP spokesperson with Dr Philippa Whitford. Dr Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Since June, the Scottish public health-based tracing system has managed to trace 99.7% of positive cases and almost 99% of their contacts. Yet in England, the commercial Circle call centres have traced less than 60% of contacts. Can the Secretary of State clarify if there are any targets included in the £10 billion contract with Circle, and if so, are they being met?
Secretary of State.
Well, obviously, if I correct it, there isn't a £10 billion contract with any private company, but the private companies have been absolutely critical in the working of making sure that the whole testing system can be built at the scale that it has. And as I just said in my statement, the improvements are continuing, and we're seeing that local engagement, which is critical, and we're seeing the testing rolled out right across the UK. For instance, in the local outbreak that happened in Aberdeen over the summer, we were able to use the UK resources to get huge amounts of testing into Aberdeen, thanks to the collaborative work between the UK government providing the UK testing and, of course, the Scottish government who were responsible for the lockdown.
We now return to Dr Philippa Whitford. Dr Whitford.
That doesn't address the fact that the call centre system run by Circle has only managed to contact 60% of people's contacts. Regional Public Health England teams have been working flat out for the last 7 months, and they are tracing over 95% of the cases they deal with. So does he really think the middle of a pandemic is a good time to be threatening their job security with a huge reorganisation?
Well, the answer to the first part of the question is that, of course, when you're trying to reach scale fast, then we use the national system, but then that engages with the local system, as we were just hearing, for instance, in Croydon, so that you can then get the boots on the ground to find those contacts that can't be contacted through the national system. It's the combination of the two that actually works best. And as for making sure that our systems and our national systems are in the best possible place to tackle coronavirus going forward, I absolutely think it's right constantly to be seeking to make improvements to how this operates. And that's why I announced the changes that I did.
And the Minister Justin Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In some areas, the private companies involved in Test and Trace have been reaching less than half of the contacts they're supposed to, not the 80% that the Secretary of State has claimed. So you don't need an algorithm to work out that their performance, when compared to local public health teams, is where test and trace is failing. So why then is it that this government is rewarding private sector failure by extending those contracts?
Mr. Speaker, as I've just explained, the test and trace system at a national level makes the immediate and very rapid first attempt at contact. And if no contact is made, then the local teams can go in, and it's the combination of the two that works best. But I really think that the opposition is making a mistake, and especially coming from the front bench, making a mistake trying to divide people between public and private, whereas actually everybody's working very hard together to deliver the control of this virus.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recognise there will be increased pressures on the NHS and social care during winter, and substantial preparations have been and are being made. The NHS has already published its winter plan, and we will shortly be publishing the winter plan for social care.
Patrick Grady.
Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly why there is a need for significant additional funding in order to prepare for a surge this winter. And that has to include a fully funded pay rise for health and care staff. At the height of the crisis, the Secretary of State was saying now is not the time to consider a pay rise. So when will the time be? Is it now, or will it be some point in the future?
Minister.
As I expect he knows, we have announced £3 billion of additional NHS funding for the winter, and we are continually looking at any additional funding needs for social care.
We now come to Shadow Minister, Dr. Rosina Allington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a looming mental health crisis this winter, and as such, it is absolutely vital to meet with experts. I know that the Secretary of State believes this is important, so, Mr. Speaker, I asked him several parliamentary questions wanting to know how many mental health trusts and organisations he met with during the first 3 months of lockdown. I was told, and I quote, that he holds these meetings regularly. However, a Freedom of Information request revealed that the Health Secretary and Mental Health Minister only organised 2 meetings with mental health trusts and organisations during this entire period. We on these benches are wanting to know if the Secretary of State can confirm that he did not attend either of these 2 meetings, and does he think this is an acceptable track record?
The Secretary of State has regular meetings about the future of mental health for stakeholders.
Sir David Evans.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On the 18th of August, I announced the establishment of a brand new organisation to provide a world-leading approach to public health protection and resilience, the National Institute for Health Protection. And this will bring together the health protection expertise of Public Health England, the Joint Biosecurity Centre and NHS Test and Trace under unified leadership, and it will start work immediately to boost the UK's ability to deal with COVID-19.
Sir David.
Everyone accepts that my right honourable friend's priority at the moment is fighting the invisible enemy. But with winter approaching, there will be many people worried about the threat of flu. So will my right honourable friend tell the House, are there any special arrangements for those people who wish to receive the vaccination? And does he have any further news about the reopening of all GP surgeries?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the flu vaccination programme this year will be the biggest in history. And as I was going to say in my statement, but I'll say it now for my right honourable friend, we are proposing and putting before the House proposals to expand the number of NHS clinicians, the qualified clinicians, who can administer vaccinations, whether that's for the flu programme, which we know is coming, or for a COVID vaccination programme, should a COVID vaccine come off.
Mr. Alex Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NHS Confederation, the BMA, the BDA, NHS providers, the Royal Society for Public Health and so many health charities have expressed real doubts over the Secretary of State's plans for Public Health England. It is evident that come what may, the Secretary of State is going to have his own organisation for tackling disease, and come what may, he'll be picking which of his pals he wants to lead it. But he seems to have ignored the fact that Public Health England also leads crucial work on tackling drugs and alcohol misuse, reducing smoking, promoting better sexual health and much more. 6 weeks ago, obesity was the Prime Minister's priority, and now the Health Secretary wants to cut the organisation that leads our fight against it. Mr Speaker, will the Secretary of State end the confusion today by committing that the remaining functions of Public Health England will continue to be led by a dedicated national organisation?
Well, the honourable gentleman obviously didn't read the announcement, because part of the purpose of having a dedicated National Institute for Health Protection is also to ensure that the ill health prevention agenda, the health improvement agenda, is embedded fully right across the health system, including the NHS. And this is a good day, Mr Speaker, to discuss this, because just this morning the NHS set out its next steps in its diabetes prevention and remission programme, and embedding the anti-obesity drive right across the health system, including in the NHS, is an absolute critical part of its future, and we're consulting widely on making sure we have the right and the best organisational structure to deliver this.
Suzanne Webb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Firstly, I would like to thank the Secretary of State for the question number 13.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And with your permission, I would like to group this with questions 14 and 15. In July of this year, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, announced £3 billion of additional funding to help the NHS address the challenges of winter. In addition to which, in August of this year, we set out an extra £300 million for the enhancement of UEC capacity and to provide infection control measures.
Suzanne Webb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Firstly, I would like to thank the Minister and the Secretary of State for the forward-thinking measures to support winter capacity in our hospitals. We should not, however, forget the work of the hospices, who have no season and who work compassionately all year round. Will my right honourable friend and Minister and the Secretary of State join me in visiting one of the jewels in the crown of my constituency, which is the Mary Stevens Hospice, who, due to COVID-19, have had to delay the official opening of their day service unit?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, Mr Speaker, to pay tribute to the amazing work of hospices. She's also right to highlight the work of Mary Stevens Hospice in her constituency, of which she is a great champion. I very much look forward to taking up her offer to visit.
We now come to Andy Carter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I also thank the Secretary of State for the investment into Warrington A&E, announced recently. The additional £4.3 million will create a treatment plaza and, most importantly, a new paediatric A&E unit for the hospital. Now, this investment is very welcome for the short term, but can I ask the Minister and the Secretary of State to meet with me to discuss the longer-term issues for our hospital, for plans for a better healthcare facility in Warrington South, better parking, and in the long term, a new hospital?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He's right to highlight the investment we're making in NHS infrastructure, as I believe he did recently in his Warrington Guardian column. He is well known for his energetic campaigning on behalf of his constituents for a new hospital. While such decisions are for the spending review, I'd be very happy to meet with him.
Mr Speaker, I want to welcome the extra £1.6 million the government is investing in Ipswich Hospital's A&E department ahead of the crucial winter period. But on the topic of A&E, will the Minister build upon this work by ensuring that the new plans for a £25 million A&E department at Ipswich Hospital are accelerated? If this were to happen, it will go some way to alleviating my constituents' concerns about the merger of Colchester Hospital.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He, when I visited him, I think earlier this year, made a powerful case for the longer term for a new A&E department at his hospital, a cause which he has been the driving force behind. I know the Trust are keen to progress this, and I would hope and expect they are engaging with him. While the spending review will see the final decision on spending on this by the Chancellor, his voice has been heard loud and clear.
Teresa Villiers.
The capacity of Barnet Hospital to cope with winter pressure is being assisted by a brand new modular ward with 35 beds. Can the Minister assure me that there will be continued investment in expanding NHS services in Barnet so it can cope with any COVID pressures this winter and also help clear the backlog of people who've been waiting for treatment for other conditions?
Minister.
As my right honourable friend highlights, the new modular 35-bed ward at Barnet Hospital will add to its capacity to cope with winter pressures, and more broadly, we've invested £2.5 million in the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust, of which Barnet is part. She is, of course, right to make the case for continued investment in the longer term, with her typical effectiveness and commitment to her constituency, and I'm always happy to discuss that further with her.
Arundel.
Number 17, sir.
Minister, Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, may I answer questions 17 and 18 together? We've developed capacity to over 200,000 antigen tests per day across the testing programme. We're planning for the next phase of testing and are committed to rapid and accessible testing at scale for everyone who needs one. Localisation of testing in accessible places is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Secretary of State for his answer. And he may well be aware of the outbreak in my community in Newcastle-under-Lyme, centred on the Silverdale Working Men's Club. The outbreak appears to be under control, and I'd like to praise his department for their support and also Staffordshire County Council. Close to 2,000 tests have been carried out, and a number of those at the new local centre on the Rycroft. If I could make one suggestion based on our experience of this outbreak, it's that the online booking system needs to react more quickly to make spaces available. There have always been spaces available, but they haven't always been available online, and if you could comment on that.
Yes, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for the work that he's put in over the summer to make sure that the challenges that we've seen in Newcastle-under-Lyme are dealt with as well as possible. Of course, when we put in extra testing and extra mobile testing units, making sure that that is tied in with the online booking system is critical. I'm very happy to work with him to resolve the specific issues in Newcastle.
Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alongside the need to increase capacity, there's a real need to make sure that what's already there is working properly. In Chesterfield, I've had many people contact me over the summer to say they've been waiting 4 or 5 days to get a test result back. And I've also had people that have applied online and been told to go for testing 20, 30 miles away when there's a testing centre in Chesterfield, with Chris Hobson of the NHS Providers Organisation saying that the current system isn't even fit for purpose, much less world class. Will the Secretary of State tell us what he can do to ensure that the system is ready when we approach the potential increase in cases in the autumn and winter?
Well, of course, we're constantly working to improve the system, but as the statistics I read out at the start of this this question time shows, we have made very significant progress over the summer. You know, the NHS Test and Trace is just over 3 months old and is now reaching 84% of those contacts when the contacts are given. In terms of the testing expansion, of course, when a testing site is full, then people will be directed to a nearby but not immediately close testing centre. And when there's an increase in demand for testing, then that sometimes does happen. But what we try to do is respond by putting more testing in where it is needed and in the highest risk areas, which thankfully Chesterfield is not.
Andrew Bowie.
Question 19, sir.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, the UK government is supporting the COVID-19 response right across the country. We've established the Joint Biosecurity Centre, ensuring decision makers in Scotland and across the UK have the best possible information when responding to outbreaks. And the UK-wide Test and Trace programme has significantly enhanced the ability to respond to COVID-19 in Scotland, notably through the 6 departmental funded testing sites and 18 mobile testing units, with additional ones deployed, for instance, to Aberdeen during the recent outbreak there.
Andrew Bowie.
Thank my right honourable friend for that answer. One of the things that has been welcomed in Scotland has been seeing both of Scotland's governments working together to fight this pandemic. For example, the British Army working with the Scottish Ambulance Service and local NHS boards to increase our testing capacity. Can he confirm that this one nation approach to tackling COVID will continue in the future?
Yes, there's absolutely no doubt that the combination of the UK government putting in place the capacity that you can only get because we are one united nation, working in concert with the Scottish Government and local councils who have the people on the ground who are in the communities. The combination of the two is the strongest possible approach to responding to an emergency like COVID-19.
Chris Matheson.
Question 20, please, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's clear that we'll do everything we can to protect the most vulnerable. We will not tolerate the false advertising of alternative cancer treatments. It's dangerous, but it's cruel. We will ensure penalties are handed out for any breaches of the law. And whilst there's no plans to bring in complementary therapists into regulation at present, many are registered on a voluntary registers accredited by the Professional Standards Authority for Health and Social Care, ensuring patients can access safe care.
Christian Matheson.
Speaker, my constituent Linda died of untreated breast cancer after she'd been seduced, we believe, by advertising on the internet, offering alternative therapies such as scams and pastes that were actually caustic to her body. And she died alone in my constituency some months ago. Can the Minister consider bringing in tough restrictions on advertising on the internet, particularly as people are using more, accessing internet therapies more now, and also tough restrictions on the people who practice these bogus therapies?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend. I was really saddened to hear of the death of his constituent and fully agree that we must protect people who are often so desperate to find something that will help them and give them hope of recovery. Under the Cancer Act of 1939, all advertising of cancer services and treatments is prohibited wherever they may be advertised, online or in the paper, including complementary or alternative services and for treatment that purport to be able to cure cancer. We do know that the role that the internet can play in spreading harmful messages about alternative treatments is dangerous, and I've discussed the issue in its broadest sense with my DCMS colleagues and give him assurance we're committed across government to taking any further action needed. He knows that my door's always open and I would be happy to continue this conversation at any point.
Question 21, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will take this question and question 22 together. We know those who receive social care are amongst the most vulnerable in our society. The Department of Health and Social Care has strived to support the sector throughout this pandemic, providing extensive guidance, extra funding, emergency supplies of PPE and prioritising access to testing.
Speaker, can I just express my very sincere thanks for all the help that social care services have provided throughout this ongoing crisis. But can the Minister assure me that we have learned all the lessons from the shielding programme and that the social care sector is adequately prepared for the coming winter months?
Minister.
Well, I'd like to join my right honourable friend in thanking all those who work in social care for their commitment and compassion since the start of the pandemic. We have indeed carried out work to understand the impact of shielding on people's health, and we will shortly be publishing our winter plan for adult social care, setting out our preparations for winter and in the event of a second wave.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my honourable friend confirm that every care home in England has either received a test, a coronavirus test, or is about to receive a test?
Minister.
Yes, I can. Every CQC registered care home in England has indeed been offered testing, and in fact care homes for those over 65 with dementia have been offered repeat testing. We've now opened up repeat testing to care homes for working age adults.
Shadow Minister Liscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following up from that question, ministers initially promised weekly testing for care home staff by July the 6th. They then abandoned that pledge and said routine tests wouldn't happen until September the 7th. With more than 15,000 deaths from COVID-19 in care homes so far, and winter and the flu season fast approaching, regular weekly testing of care home staff is critical. So will the Minister now guarantee that every care home will have weekly testing for their staff by Monday to help keep all of our loved ones in residential care safe?
Minister.
We are indeed determined to support social care and particularly the care homes with repeat regular testing. As the honourable member knows, because we have spoken about it, there has been a delay to our repeat testing of care homes because of a particular issue with some of the test kits, and this was communicated to her and to the sector. As I just said in my previous answer, we've now been able to offer repeat testing to all care homes for older people. We've been able now to open up the portal to those with working age adults as residents, and we've initiated our second round of repeat testing for the older sector.
Martin Vickers.
Number 24, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his question. He and I have had the opportunity in the past to discuss his hospital trust, and I pay tribute to its work. I am conscious his trust has faced financial challenges, running a £57 million deficit a year ago. That has now been halved, meeting the financial control total. I also understand income levels at his trust have increased by 22% since 2015-16 to last year.
Martin Vickers.
I thank the Minister for a reply and also for meeting me and my honourable friend from Grimsby before the recess. Could I emphasise the importance of the Diana, Princess of Wales Hospital in Grimsby that serves my constituency as well? They need 150 to 200 million pounds of major infrastructure work to avoid infrastructure failure. Could I urge the Minister to consider that and bear in mind the pressures on the Trust as he considers the additional resources?
Minister.
My honourable friend quite rightly raises the Diana, Princess of Wales Hospital in Grimsby. He's raised it with me before. I give him that commitment.
Guns.
Number 25, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is clear that we must care for the health of our population. In July, we published the ambitious strategy to empower adults and children to live healthier lives, taking forward actions from the previous 3 chapters of the Childhood Obesity Plan and laying out a series of initiatives. It sets out an overarching campaign to reduce obesity and gives measures to get the nation fitter, to protect, importantly, against COVID-19, to protect the NHS, but most importantly, to improve individuals' health and well-being and quality of life.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is strong support for the government's ambition to reduce obesity amongst children and young people in particular. Now, there are many calls for advertising bans for broadcasters for high salt and sugar content, for example. But those are not as straightforward as they would suggest, because it has the risk of driving advertising online, which is far more targeted and some might believe to be much more effective in communicating their message to attract people to buy those products. So does the Minister recognise that this is a complex picture that needs lots of analysis before clear policies are decided upon?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank my right honourable friend for the question, and I know he has a keen interest as a keen marathon runner in us all keeping fit. I couldn't agree with him more. Our children consume their online watching is considerably more than terrestrial television, and that's precisely why we've included a consultation in the online space to ensure that we've fully considered all of those impacts that he's just mentioned before we move forward, and any changes to advertising restrictions before they're introduced.
Heather Wheeler.
Question 26, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will deliver 50,000 more nurses for... with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will group this question with question 27. We will deliver 50,000 more nurses for our NHS. We're increasing the number of student nursing places on degree courses, improving the experience of working in the NHS so fewer nurses leave, and we'll also add to our homegrown nurses through international recruitment. I'm happy to report that we now have 13,840 more nurses in the NHS than a year ago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for her answer. Would she agree with me that the changes made by Project 2000 in 1986 led to a large group of caring people being excluded for training to be nurses? If we are to recruit many more nurses, I think this approach should be rethought, with the recruits once again being able to learn on the job as they did prior to 1986. This would bring nurses' education much more in line with the government's recognition that university is not for all children, and fulfil our objective to have apprenticeships in all walks of life.
My honourable friend makes an extremely good point. We want all those with the capability and aspiration to become nurses to be able to do so. That's why we're supporting multiple routes to becoming a nurse. While the majority of new nurses take the university route, another option is the degree apprenticeship, which enables students to earn while they learn. And last month, we announced a £172 million funding package to double the number of nursing apprenticeships.
Angela Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to hear that we're successfully recruiting into the nursing profession. Does my honourable friend agree that it's not just school leavers, but dedicated and caring people of all ages and diverse working backgrounds who have the transferable skills needed to start nursing qualifications? And will she outline what steps her department is taking to engage with these individuals and encourage them to consider nursing as a vocation?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I completely agree that nursing should be open to all men and women from diverse backgrounds. A £5,000 grant to all nursing degree students starting this autumn will help students with the cost of that degree course. In addition to the apprenticeships route I just mentioned, in January we're launching an online blended nursing degree to give another route into nursing.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's nice to see you in your place again. Question number 28.
Sorry, I'm a little keen, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member. Diabetic eye screening has continued throughout the pandemic for those at the highest risk. NHS England and Improvement is working closely with service providers to ensure that where services took the decision to reschedule screening appointments during the pandemic, those services are restored as soon as it's safely possible to do so in order to minimise any risk to individual patients and with appointments based on clinical need.
Jim Shannon.
Again, I thank the Minister for her response. As always, it's very comprehensive. In relation to diabetes, can I also ask a question about screening but also about weight loss? Can the Minister state outline what funding has been set aside for those who are morbidly obese and need gastric procedures urgently to set them on the path to better health? As per the Prime Minister's statement in reaction to the massively increased risk of death from COVID-19 for those who are obese, it's very important to address all of the issues.
Start.
I thank the honourable gentleman. So along with our world-leading obesity strategy that I spoke about earlier, we've also announced today a targeted dietary approach to diabetes. From next week, thousands of people will be able to access a rigorous weight loss programme to help tackle type 2 diabetes. The diet and lifestyle plans have been shown to put diabetes into remission for many people recently diagnosed. This will provide 5,000 more patients with the first stage in an NHS drive to increase access to the NHS Diabetes Prevention Programme, and it builds on the commitment to get another 200,000 people into the life-changing programme. We know diabetes increase the risk of other health challenges and coronavirus, so it's vital we take action immediately to help them.
Question
number 29, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Honourable Lady knows, the negotiations with the EU on our future relationship with it, following the end of the transition period, are ongoing. This government is delivering on its pledge to respect democracy and the referendum result, with the UK engaging continuously and constructively in those negotiations. We must await the outcome of those negotiations, in which health-related aspects are a very important part, rather than prejudging what will emerge from them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In just 4 months' time, new customs bureaucracy will lead to increased drug costs for the NHS, including insulin, which the UK doesn't produce. Pharmaceutical and medical supply firms report that they're struggling to rebuild last year's stockpiles because of global shortages due to COVID. How does he plan to ensure that patients won't face any shortages next year?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. The Department is putting in place a multi-layered approach to help ensure the continuity of supply of medicines and medical products in any case that might fall out of the negotiations and at the end of the transition period, and we are confident we will maintain continuity of supply.
Sarah Olney. Not here. Daniel Zeitner.
Number 31, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
GPs with symptoms can be tested through the self-referral portal, and in addition we are launching pilots in Northamptonshire, Peterborough and Cambridgeshire to provide regular COVID-19 testing for professionals who visit care homes regularly and provide services which can become within 1 metre of residence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's all in the future, of course. I was talking to GPs in Cambridge last week, and they told me about the difficulty they have in getting tested before going to care homes. Indeed, one of them told me she had to pretend to be a care worker to get a test. That cannot be right after all this time, can it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the pilots are now being launched in Peterborough, Cambridgeshire to provide regular COVID-19 testing professionals, and I would think that problem is probably resolved.
We're now going to wander up to Yasmin Qureshi in Bolton. Yasmin Qureshi.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister is aware that the Cumberland Review has clearly set out government failures, premiums not being withdrawn, and thousands of babies being born with severe deformities. Does she think it's acceptable to cite legal action, which has no bearing on this report's finding, to continue to delay the justice for the families? Will she meet with me and the APPG to discuss a roadmap to implement the recommendations for all the 3 causes without further delay?
To Westminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We welcomed the Cumberland report. We are looking into the recommendations that were made, but the honourable lady knows that as a result of live litigation, I am not able to comment further.
33 withdrawn, so we go to Bambos Lombos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 34.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, guidance to explain the government's policy on face coverings continues to be updated and fully takes into account groups with protected characteristics. This guidance makes clear that there are exemptions for people who are unable for a variety of reasons to wear face coverings. We have also run a proactive communications campaign to make sure people are aware that some people are unable to wear a face covering in certain circumstances.
Georgina Fellows is a rape survivor who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder when her mouth is covered. Georgina and others like her have been challenged for not wearing a mask in shops and on public transport, which causes further stress and anxiety. So does the Minister support Georgina's campaign for a badge to identify people who legitimately can't wear a mask? And will she consider raising awareness of this issue via a public information campaign?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was incredibly sorry to hear what Georgina has been through and fully understand that she and others who have undergone traumatic experiences cannot wear a face covering without distress. And that's why our guidance and public messaging has been very clear that there may be people who should be exempt from wearing a covering for a variety of reasons. It's also clear that people don't need to prove it when challenged. We are actively engaging with stakeholders and charities to help ensure these messages sensitively get across, and we will continue to do so. But I would, of course, welcome a fuller discussion with my honourable friend about anything we can do to further help individuals like Georgina.
We're now having to go to topicals, so Secretary of State Topical 1.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. As well as our work to fight coronavirus, we are continuing our historic levels of investment into the NHS. Good progress is being made over the projects for 40 new hospitals, and the number of NHS nurses in England has increased by over 13,000 compared with this time last year, and the number of doctors up also by over 9,000. This landmark investment is bearing fruit.
Can I welcome back my good friend Tony Lloyd? Tony Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for that welcome. And I'm one of those who most certainly owes an awful lot to the care and dedication of NHS staff. But can I ask the Secretary of State and Health Ministers a very simple question? One waiting list which is going up has been the amount of time overseas doctors offered jobs in the UK have to wait for a visa. Can they have a quiet word with Home Office ministers and make sure we have a joined-up government and these doctors, who are part of the solution, can get those visas?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, can I join you in welcoming the honourable member back to the screens and hopefully one day soon back to the House in person. The question he raises is an important one. I'm working with the Home Office to introduce the NHS visa, which will not only mean that the numbers are uncapped, but also that the administration around visas is much reduced. It's not just about Home Office administration, it's also about reducing the burden of bureaucracy from the GMC and others, and the GMC are working incredibly hard to reduce the bureaucratic requirement whilst still ensuring that any doctors that come to practice in this country are properly, fully qualified and can speak English to the high enough standard that people of Rochdale and the whole country would expect.
Select Committee Chair Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ongoing problems in maternity units in Shrewsbury and Telford and East Kent hospitals have shown that independent, blame-free investigations into baby deaths have never been more important. So will the Secretary of State confirm it is still the Government's intention to put the Healthcare Safety Investigations branch onto a statutory footing and that those plans will remain in the Queen's speech later this year?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, nobody has done more for the cause of patient safety in this country than my right honourable friend. And we are seeking to put the Health Service Investigatory Branch into law at the earliest legislative opportunity. He will know that as a minister I couldn't possibly preempt what Her Majesty might say in a few months' time in the other place. But I will say that in the same way that we introduced this bill just before the election, it is our full intention to legislate for it at the earliest chance.
Shadow Secretary of State Jonathan Ashworth with the first of two questions.
Grateful. I listened carefully to the Secretary of State's response to the honourable member from Southend. Can he guarantee that he has currently sourced enough flu vaccine to vaccinate all 50 to 64-year-olds by Christmas?
We have the biggest flu vaccination programme in history, and we set out very clearly, when we announced the plans, our proposals, which are that we will vaccinate those who are clinically most vulnerable, which starts with the over 65s and those with another health condition which causes them to be particularly vulnerable to flu, and then move to vaccinate the 50 to 64-year-olds. We set that out several weeks ago. It is exactly as clinically recommended to make sure that we not only have the biggest flu vaccination in history, but we get it to the people who really need it first.
I think he was saying there he can't guarantee vaccinations for all 50 to 64-year-olds, but we are heading into a difficult winter. He knows that, the whole House will know that. One area of the health service that is particularly under pressure is rehab services and community mental health services, because they're often now treating people who have had COVID and have long-term conditions associated with having COVID. Yet many local areas are currently putting up local community and public health contracts out to competitive tender. This could mean staff being made redundant, it could open the door to the Virgin Cares coming in. At the very least, it's distracting and wasteful. Will he halt all competitive tendering of community and public health contracts until the end of the pandemic?
What I'll do is I'll ensure that we put the best possible resources to improve the public health of the nation. And that is our goal, that is our policy. It of course, follows on from the policy that was put in place by the government of which he was a behind-the-scenes part. He knows very well, Mr. Speaker, that I admire the work that he did when he was trying to expand the provision of health services. No matter where those health services come from, what matters is the quality of the service that people get on the front line. And that's what we'll be focused on this side.
Anthony Higginbottom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, the people of Burnley will have the additional restrictions that have been in place for the last month removed. And that's only been possible because of the efforts and sacrifice of people across Burnley. And so I wanted to start by putting on record my wholehearted thanks to people in Burnley, Padiham and all of our villages. These have been difficult measures, but they have been effective at driving down the virus. Could the Secretary of State reassure me, though, that as an area of enhanced support, we will still get access to government support to make sure that we continue to make progress?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has been a tireless advocate for Burnley he's quite right to praise the people of Burnley who've had local restrictions put in place, and because of the actions they've taken and because they've followed their duty and followed those rules, tougher rules, and the sacrifices they've made, the case rate has come down in Burnley, and I pay tribute to him and every single resident of Burnley who's played their part. Absolutely, the enhanced support will continue in Burnley, as it does across those parts of Greater Manchester and East Lancashire and West Yorkshire that we've been able to take out of the most restrictive measures, and we continue to watch with vigilance.
Bob Blomfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will know that on Friday, the Royal College of Nursing launched a campaign for a 12.5% pay increase, which will do only a little more than restore pay to the real pay to the value it had in 2010 when the Conservatives were elected. Now, there is huge public support for all who work in our health and care system. So, ahead of the budget, will the Secretary of State commit to pressing the Chancellor for the funds necessary to pay all our health and care staff properly?
Well, of course, we've put in, over the last 2.5 years, some very significant pay rises for nurses, and this whole House commends the work that the nursing profession as a whole and each individual nurse has done during this pandemic. And of course, we're putting in unprecedented sums into the NHS, and we work to make sure that everybody has the best possible working conditions, both now and in the future.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. LGBT so-called conversion therapy is an abhorrent and fraudulent practice. So please, will my right honourable friend confirm to me and all my Conservative colleagues across the House who care deeply about this issue that he will do all he can to end this abusive practice at the very earliest opportunity?
Yes, I will. I agree wholeheartedly with my honourable friend that so-called conversion therapy is abhorrent. I praise her for the campaign that she's running on this. I agree with the Prime Minister, who from this dispatch box has committed to ensure that this practice is stamped out. We have a review underway, and I make sure that I work very closely with my honourable friend who's done so much to make the case.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Care homes in my constituency and right across the country are currently waiting several weeks to access coronavirus tests, and those in supported living still cannot access regular testing. I wrote to the Care Minister last month about this, but I've yet to receive a reply. So will the Secretary of State please confirm today when regular testing will be available and swift testing in care homes and supported living, or will he finally admit that this so-called protective ring for social care simply does not exist?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have been rolling out the asymptomatic testing for those in care homes, residents and staff. As she'll know from the statement I gave to the House in July, we had a problem with the supply of tests from one particular company, which caused some difficulties, and we've spent the summer catching up on that programme.
Simon Bent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend join me in welcoming the appointment of Jo Whitehead as the new Chief Executive of the Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board in North Wales, and wish her every success with resolving specific issues like the cramped doctors' surgery premises in my constituency of Clwyd South in Hanmer, and more generally in reducing the stubbornly high waiting lists in North Wales.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as the UK Health Secretary, whilst, of course, the direct provision of healthcare has devolved, I take an interest in ensuring that we have high-quality healthcare right across the country, and I'm very happy to work with my colleagues in the Welsh Government on improving the delivery of services in Betsy Cadwallader Health Service. I wish the new Chief Executive all the very best, and I'm sure that she will take that service, improve it, and work with her colleagues in this House to make sure that the people of North Wales get the very best health services that they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having used the coronavirus testing kits produced by Randox, which was awarded a £133 million contract by the government, care homes in Blackburn were told the kits were unsafe and should carry out retests. Now, as the Secretary of State knows, people in Blackburn have worked extremely hard to get the virus rates down. However, when the care homes asked for replacement kits, they were informed that they had already received a quota and no kits would be available until September. Now, on one hand, the government's saying don't use the kits. In the next hand, they're saying we have no kits to replace them with. When will the government reassure care homes in Blackburn they will receive regularly test kits and, more importantly at this stage, rapid results on those tests?
Yes, well, in response to the last point, the turnaround time for test results is now the next day for almost everyone. But there has been a challenge with the Randox kits, as referred to just now in a previous question. The test results from those Randox kits that were withdrawn were accurate. The challenge was that the Randox kits did not pass our very high and stringent standards for not being themselves fully as clean as we would have wanted. I am informed by the clinicians that there's no evidence of any health threat from this, but of course we've got to make sure that we protect people as much as possible. Hence, we had to withdraw the kits. As I said, we've got a catch-up programme that's underway.
So they'll be replaced, just to help the member. Yes. Okay, Matt Vickers.
Pandemic, I've been volunteering at my local hospital and have seen firsthand the outstanding dedication, enthusiasm and care given by all who work at North Tees. This fantastic award-winning workforce deserve to work in a modern, fit-for-purpose building. Would my right honourable friend join me in visiting this ageing building to see how we can make it fit for the future?
Yes, I'd love to come up to Stockton and have a look round. I've enjoyed my many visits, especially one in December, which went particularly well just before the House reconvened after the general election.
Yesterday, a dear friend of mine died of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's a cancer that has the lowest survival rate of all common cancers, and yet it receives less than 2% of funding for cancer research. Half of all the diagnoses come about only after emergency admissions to hospital, because patients commonly visit their GPs 3 or 4 times with symptoms before being referred to a consultant. What will the Secretary of State do to improve early diagnoses of this disease? Because it's killing 10,300 people a year. That's 28 people a day.
Secretary of State. Mr. Speaker, my heart goes out to the honourable member and the family and friends of his friend who he spoke about just now so movingly. He's absolutely right to raise this. The early diagnosis of cancer is a critical part of improving survival rates from cancer in this country. And in fact, we talk in this House over the last 6 months an awful lot about testing and diagnosis of COVID. Frankly, this country needs to increase its testing and diagnosis of all diseases, including cancer. For a generation, we haven't had enough testing. And he's quite right to raise this issue, because it's not just about people coming forward, it's also about then the problems being spotted earlier. We're investing £200 million in more rapid diagnostic centres. We're trying to get diagnostics not just in the major hospitals, but out into the community, so that they're closer to primary care. And there's a major piece of work underway, both to recover the backlog that was necessarily built up during COVID, that is underway, and the backlog's down by about half, but also to go further and to never give up on trying to have earlier diagnosis of cancer.
In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I now suspend the House for 3 minutes. Order.